Oh, the sky's clear. We've got the Milky Way and all kinds of stuff. And oh my gosh, another rocket launch here at night. Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. Glad you're with us to stay star curious today as we mix up some backyard astronomy with some space history and, of course, look back and honor the loss of life in America's uh, crusade after the 9/11 attacks on our country 22 years ago today. Here's a beautiful sign of freedom there. The United Launch Alliance rocket going off in the backdrop here. Thank you, Carlton Bailey. What a beautiful photograph that is of this rocket launch Saturday morning. And Marty Winkle, hello to you, my co-producer on our program here. Good to see you, Marty. Carlton nailed that one. I'm looking at the beautiful exhaust plume there behind me. How you doing, Marty?
I'm doing good, Mark. How are you?
Well, good to see you. Glad to get another weekend of some nice weather under our belts here. Hope everybody's enjoyed the late summer as we're transitioning to the autumn skies. And we saw that as I did a little stargazing over the weekend, encouraging everyone to get out while the moon is deep into the morning sky. So you can get out and see some starshine instead of moonlight in your background, in your backyard. So we're going to talk a little about that today. The moon, like I said, is transitioning into the morning sky. People like Marty have asked me, what is that bright star at 6 in the morning when I'm out getting ready to go to the gym or walking the dog? That is Venus, and Venus was just in our evening sky, you recall, being so brilliant and bright. Well, it went through what we call conjunction with the sun, went between the earth and the sun, actually, and we couldn't see it because it's so bright in the daytime sky, and then it pops up before the sun rises. And we had a comet that we promoted also was in the morning sky. Very hard to see with the naked eye, but with photographer you could see that. We posted some pictures of that on Facebook. I forgot to put one in to brag about. I didn't get a chance to photograph it. Too much light pollution where I live down here. So we're going to talk a little bit about, we got two astronaut birthdays coming up. We've got some astronaut is breaking the duration, long duration in space. You may have heard that in the news. And then talk a little bit about a new moonquake has been discovered with 50-year-old data. Something's going on with the Apollo 17 descent stage. It's been on the moon since December 1972. So stay curious about that. But we do want to pause a moment. We'll talk about it later in the program and think about the tragedy that happened to America when we were attacked 22 years ago today. Many of us adults always will remember where we're at when that happened. Over 3,000 people lost their lives in New York City, in Pennsylvania, and at the Pentagon, where planes crashed, killing innocent people. And so, we're going to talk a little bit about that to end our program from the standpoint that there was one American that was not on the Earth at that time. Of course, that was Frank Culbertson orbiting the Earth in the International Space Station, the Neophyte station in 2001, just a couple tubes basically. Him and two Russians on an expedition crew up there, and a photograph he took that everyone probably has seen, but we'll revisit that. So, Marty, I got to thinking about this horrible event, and time doesn't really heal this wound for over 3,000 people and their families that lost lives. I watched some of this morning, the tributes going on there at Ground Zero in New York City. And it made me think about, the freedom that we do exercise here. And I ran across this picture for no particular reason to put up a picture of me on the left there, and that's Ken Havicott on the right. Ken's one of the world's renowned collectors and space dealers. He's done it all his life since high school. He's also one of the memorabilia postal covers is how he started his business, getting all the postal dates of all the Gemini, Mercury, Apollo launches, and then the shuttle launches. Well, there I am on the left, and we got Chris Callies beside me. That's Tim Gagnon in the middle, and the way back is Doug Forrest. Hey, Doug, good to see you. We've got Tom Usiak in the back, and in the blue shirt is Steve Nolte. Usiak and Nolte, of course, excellent rocket photographers. Tim Gagnon there in the middle, the patch guy. He's got dozens of patches, Marty, orbiting the Earth on the space station, his own creation. How cool is that? We talk a lot about Doug Forrest in the background there and his fabulous pencil artwork, and Chris Callie, author of over 40 U.S. stamps. We're all there as Havocott, Ken Havocott's holding court in his house, just talking about some of his memorabilia there, and that we have spread out there. Just an amazing conversation. Let's see, me, Havocott, and Tim Gagnon live here on the Space Coast, and the other four gentlemen, flew here and to enjoy this. And so I don't take for granted what we can do at the American Space Museum to have encounters like this and share knowledge of space history. It enriches all of us in so many ways, and we love sharing that knowledge with you on Stay Curious. Well, happy birthday today to one of the American heroes, if there ever was one. Happy 86th birthday to Bob Crippen here. Bob was born September 11th, 1937 in Beaumont, Texas. Robert Laurel Crippen is truly an American hero. His brave test flight as pilot of the first space shuttle launch of Columbia on August 12, 1981, with John Young, goes down as one of the boldest flights ever. He was one of the 17 astronauts chosen for the Winged Dinosaur spacecraft that was never developed, and the Manned Orbiting Laboratory, the MOLE. All right. He traveled to space 4 times as pilot of STS-1, and then he had next 3 flights. Of course, he was a commander of STS-7, Sally Ride's mission, STS-41C in April 8, 1984, and 41G in October 84. And he's received the Congressional Space Medal of Honor. And he, of course, was a center director for 2 years, Kennedy Space Center director from July 87 to December 89. And with his own money, Bob Crippen participated in the recovery operations for looking for the crew members of Challenger out there in the ocean. So quite a guy and quite a supporter of the American Space Museum. Crippen was very involved with our godfather, Charlie Mars, and our executive director, Karan Conklin, raising money for Spaceview Park. And we will never forget him for that. Also, one of the neatest artifacts we have in our Space Museum, I call that Bob Smeat. That is the outfit that Bob Crippen wore on the Smeat program, the Skylab Medical Experiment Altitude Test, where Crippen, Thornton, and the late Bobco, Thornton died a few years ago, and Bo Bobco died about a month ago. They spent, I think, 58 days in a simulated atmospheric situation as if they were on Skylab wearing these official Skylab uniform there, which is fireproof, hence the color is what our Nick Enix, our collection manager, has found out about that. And that's one of my favorite things, Marty, in the museum. I call it Bob Smeat there. We've got Bob Crippen's handprints there in bronze right before there. You can put your hands on that. Great commander, great American. Hope he's celebrating in style his 87th birthday, Mr. Bob Crippen. Also born today is Randy Bresnik here. Randy is 56 years old, born in Fort Knox, Kentucky, but considers Santa Monica, California, to be his hometown. He's the first Citadel graduate to go to space there and has 150 days on 2 missions. There he is at the Nemo underwater undersea exploration mission on Aquarius in September 2014. This is the facility where they get a taste of being in a confined environment. They're not too far underneath the ocean, but you can't come up just like that. You got to decompress. So he was involved with that off the coast of Key Largo as a Nemo 19 participant, and he headed the closeout crew of the final shuttle mission 135. Bresnik was on 129, did 2 spacewalks to install wireless video system on the ISS, and then he was launched on a Soyuz rocket and spacecraft in 2017 and returned 139 days later. Happy birthday to Randy Bresnik. He is still an active astronaut. And some of you may have heard in the news today that we have an astronaut who has broken the endurance record for time spent in space by an American. And that is this astronaut right here, Frank Rubio, who has, there's Frank. Frank is now on his 355th day in space. He will not be coming back no earlier than September 27th, okay? So he's going to be up there another 18 days or so. So he will surpass 365 days in space. And that, of course, the highly touted mission of Scott Kelly. There's Rubio. Good guy there. Yeah. There's a Rubio transition. Sorry, I was talking about him. Didn't have the picture up there. There he is in the International Space Station. This is his only. He was supposed to be up there 6 months. Went up with the Russian crew. We're going to show you here in a minute. And the Russian spacecraft developed a leak, an ammonia coolant leak, and it was. You could see the spew coming out of it. Still some conjecture whether it's a metal fatigue or hit by a meteorite, micrometeorite. Of course, it's come back to Earth, so they're not staying. So they sent up another spacecraft to bring them back and decided just to keep that fresh spacecraft up there for 6 months. We don't want to waste a new spacecraft and bring it back right away. So that's why the whole crew is coming back after, and going to spend about 366, 67 days in space. Incredible. Here are our long duration American astronauts. From left to right, Mark Vande Hei has 355 days in a row. Scott Kelly, 340 days in a row. That was the highly touted year in space, but it was only 340 days for Scott Kelly. Nothing to sneeze at, though. Christina Cook, 328 days on her mission on the space station. She is an Artemis astronaut that's going to wave at the moon as she passes by 6,000 miles away on Artemis 2, which was projected to be November 2024. I saw a story that may push that back to January 2025. Peggy Whitson is next there with 289 days in space. And then Drew Morgan, NASA astronaut Drew Morgan on the far right, he spent 272 days in a row in space. So who's up in space right now? 10 astronauts in space, all right? Frank Rubio's up there with Sergei Prokhorov. He is the commander of Expedition 69. And Dmitry Petelin, the other Russian up there, is actually there's 3 Russians up there. We'll see the 3rd Russian here in just a minute. But you got 7 on the International Space Station. Here's the other 4, of course, from Crew 7, Jasmine Mogbili. They just been up there 16 days, all right? Andreas Morgensen, though, in the upper right-hand corner, Jasmine, the Marine, she's in the upper left. She commanded Crew 7. Andreas Morgensen, he had a long-duration crew mission, and he is ESA astronaut from the Netherlands, 260 days in space total. And you got on the lower left is Furukawa, Satoshi Furukawa from Japan. He's been up there 16 days, of course, with the crew, but his total is 183 days. He was on his second time to go to space. And Konstantin Borisov, rookie there, 16 days in space. So the Chinese have Ying Ye Pang, Yu Hai Chu, and Zhu Yangzhu. And they've been up there a total of 104 days. They're going to stay up there about through November, and then they'll swap that crew out. Another 6 months cycling out for the Chinese. Ying Hang Peng there, he's their most experienced Tachonaut, they call them. He's been in space 4 times. So, he's still got a lot in him. He could go again. So, well, we're thinking about all these astronauts in space. The Crew 7 had 2 rookies on it, Mobelli and Borisov. That made 604 humans have orbited Earth since the dawn of time. And 74 of those 604 are women by our calculations here. I'm going to sharpen up a pen and try to get that with a little more... I want that verified by Bill Harwood at CBS. And Harwood's list includes all the suborbital people, which is up to about 40 now. All right. Well, we were talking a little bit about space exploration, space launches. We've got this beautiful launch here behind us of Carlton Bailey. That is the Silent Barker launch by United Launch Alliance, their Delta rocket there. What a gorgeous morning shot that was. But a couple nights earlier, I photographed this from my backyard, the SpaceX Falcon 9, just before it separates. Of course, the engines are right over the bright on the right there, but the flame, Marty, as it comes out, it's fun to watch. It changes in predictable colors now. I've seen it so much. When it's mostly orange, and the orange changes to red, and then the red starts to go blue and turquoise like it's doing here, right near those engines. And that's when those 9 Merlins shut down. You don't see anything, then you see the first stage kick on. The second stage kicks on, I mean. So it's quite a rhythm that we've got down here on the Space Coast, as this was the 48th launch. A noisy backyard launch again, Marty. I'm 30 miles away there from my backyard. Though Carlton Bailey's excellent photograph here, he's just a few miles away there. I love that shot there, CB, with the exhaust. It's got a lot of color in it. Look at those lavenders and stuff. But there's a shot from my backyard. And you know, it reminds me of why we explore, why we're doing this. Exploration at its finest, though that Saturday daytime launch, by the way, Marty, was the first launch in 14 night launches. 14 in a row night launches. This was the first one in the daylight in months. And I was wondering about that when I was going, wow, I haven't, set my camera for a daytime launch in a while here. But that's what it looks like 30 miles away, just south of the pad in Port St. John. And that's the night shot there. So why do we explore? Why do we continually push the envelope? Because man continues to learn more about himself. And thank you, our IT engineer, Bruce Jacobs, sent me this picture saying, Mark, maybe you ought to do a story about how science has evolved so quickly. And this is a great demonstration of it. This is a 1994 photograph on the left of Pluto, the best that we could get with the Hubble telescope. Look at those pixelated out picture there. And on the right, in 2015 or 2019 is when New Horizons went by Pluto and gives us this close-up. So we forever look at Pluto like we do on the right when we saw it for the first time and only time close up by the New Horizons spacecraft. And on the left, that was 1994, the best that we could do. So it's just incredible what a mere 20 some years, the technology takes us to this blob on the left, to this incredible world on the right, the dwarf planet, forever Pluto in my heart, planet Pluto. But so that so we learn with this technology and go back and revisit old technology and old data. And here's a story that I'm going, what are they talking about? When I saw a little crawl about it on the news, and it said Apollo 17 uh, uh, descent stage causing moonquakes. And I go, what's that all about? So, Marty, there's your Apollo 17 LEM 12. That's tail number 12, correct? Lunar Module 12 there on the moon there. NASA photo, they put the date up there on it. And this is on the right, it's superimposed over the Challenger, is the name of the lander, the descent stage as imaged by the lunar orbiter that for 12 years has been giving us incredible views of everything that's even crashed on the moon. We see the craters of it, like Luna 25 that crashed a couple months ago. And then we see the rover, the Russian rover that failed. And then we see the India rover that didn't fail on the moon. So what's going on here is that when the Apollo astronauts went on the moon, they put seismometers on there. In Apollo 17, through all these seismometers, they found 4 types of moonquakes: deep moonquakes, shallow moonquakes, thermal moonquakes, and the kind stemming from meteor impacts. But a look at the thermal earthquake data, the thermal earthquake recorded by Apollo 17 50 years ago, they went back and looked at old data. It revealed a 5th and unexpected type of moonquake. All right. Well, these thermal quakes are caused by the intense temperature change. As the lunar night becomes day, it takes 28.5 days for the whole lunar day to happen. So that sunlight crawls across slowly on what we call the terminator, and it can be 250 degrees in the daytime and down to 200 below zero at night. So that's a 400-degree fluctuation. All right. Well, they were trying to figure out what these mystery quakes were, and they realized that they came from the Apollo 17 lunar base itself, which expands and vibrates each lunar morning as it becomes heated by the sun. Here's a quote from the lead scientist. Let me look here. Yeah. Every lunar morning when the sun hits the lander, it starts popping off. Every 5 to 6 minutes, there's another pop, and over a period of 5 to 7 hours, more popping. They were incredibly regular and repeating. So this data was taken for 7 months before either the data was turned off or the power unit gave out, which was nuclear. I thought it'd last longer than that, Marty, than 7 months. But anyway, this data was from October 76 to May 77. And well, no, the data had been harvested for since 72, so the data is continually streaming back at periods of time. So for years we've got this data. I thought it was just a small period of time, but it's not. So they're hearing this popping, and it's creating lunar quakes caused by this base of the Apollo 17 descent stage. That Marty, you walked all around that when you were working for Grumman there, I reckon. There it is showing you on the lunar surface there. It says Challenger descent stage. That is this right here. So it pops, it crackles just like Rice Krispies, and creates some vibrations through those legs that they can translate to on the seismometers. So they are contributing to our seismic knowledge of a celestial body, and that's important for future development of maybe spacecraft on the moon there. So found that quite interesting. Well, talked about getting a little stargazing going on over the weekend. Here is this is the Herky Huffman Park. That's about 50 miles east of Titusville, a little bit south. Excuse me. It's more over west of Melbourne area, and you see a little bit of the Milky Way above that center tree there. That bright area right that you see towards the top, that's actually a star cluster. That's not a star, that's a cluster of stars there. So it was kind of cloudy, as you can see, but there is some dark shafts of the Milky Way there. The You've got the vertical shot there, shows a little bit more of the Milky Way there. And this is looking south towards Sagittarius. The teapot is in there, and a little bit of Scorpio. The teapot, we're looking at the tail of Scorpio, and then in the upper left, the stars form a teapot triangle there. I didn't have a chance to point that out, but we'll do in the future. So what we have as I look here at my chart is this is the part of the sky we're looking at. This is a great sky chart for the month of September that you can use from your backyard. You see south, so you face the south and look with this facing that way. At the top is the north. So if this was the north, I'd tilt it up so I can see the north of it looking up. And the blue of this sky chart is the Milky Way going directly overhead right now. This is from skymaps.com. You may freely distribute this according to them for educational use and astronomy education like we do here. So the moon is in the after midnight sky. Okay, last quarter of the moon was on the 6th, 4 days ago. So new moon is going to be on the 15th. All right, 4 days from now. And that's when the moon is above or below the sun in the daytime sky. You can't see it. But on October, the next new moon, the moon is going to pass in front of the sun for a total eclipse. It's going to be seen partially across America. And we're going to be seeing it from about 11:30 Saturday, October 14th till 3 o'clock. The moon's going to cover up half the sun. So we'll be talking more about that and safe ways to see it with whatever the local astronomy club's doing is a safe way to see it. But it's a partial eclipse of the sun in October, and then of course April will be a total eclipse of the sun seen across much of America. Directly overhead we have Cygnus the Swan, which looks like a cross shape called the Northern Cross. You've got Vega is another bright star, and Lyra the Harp is right overhead, right in the middle of this map. And then you've got Altair and Aquila the Eagle. And Altair, the Northern Cross of Cygnus the Swan, has a bright star Deneb in it. The Deneb, Vega, and Altair are extremely bright. You can't miss them looking overhead. And they form a triangle out of 3 different constellations. That asterism is called the Summer Triangle. Now, another asterism that is to the north and to the west is the Big Dipper. The Big Dipper is setting right now and as low as it goes in the sky. All right, that's why you see it in the upper right-hand corner, up top up there. It's scraping against the horizon, though it never sets. And there you see the pointer stars to the Little Dipper right there. So good use of a star chart like this can set you on a path to understanding the stars. They're like dot to dots. One of my favorite things to do as a kid was those dot to dot in the cartoons and the books of those. I just love doing those. Well, that's what's going on here. Is you're seeing basically the stars create a dot to dot outline of what ancients thousands of years ago imagined was up in the sky. Now I know it's hard as heck to see Draco the dragon or make out a flying winged horse as Pegasus the horse, which Pegasus is right center left there. The great square Pegasus is seen there. I know these are hard to figure out. Cetus the whale is in there, but this was the entertainment that people had thousands of years ago. In fact, the only entertainment they had a couple hundred years ago. There was no radio or television 200 years ago, folks. And I love watching all these old film noirs. One of my things is to watch the black and white film noir movies depicting the 20s and the 30s. And of course, nobody's watching TV. Very few people are depicted listening to the radio. They're all going to the nightclubs and smoking cigarettes like crazy in these film noirs. But my point is, you had to find stuff to do for entertainment, and people went out a lot more back in the day before television and radio. And of course, radio was a huge impact on society, and now TV. And folks, we're only like 60 years of modern television. All right, we're 60 years ago. A television was a piece of furniture that had a record player in it and a radio in it. Okay. Today, we've got a television in your pocket, basically. And you've also got a way to learn the constellations in your pocket by downloading an app. All of the platforms have an app that you can download and see the stars. Many of them are just hold it up to the sky and it'll tell you what that bright star is. So to tell you a couple bright stars that are going on, Marty, you asked me about that the other day. He gets up early. He wanted to know what the bright star in the east was. That's the planet Venus that's reappeared in the eastern sky. Now let's go to sunset a little before 8 o'clock now, and you're looking directly east, or as where the sun rises, of course. The sun's set in the west. You look in the opposite direction about 9 o'clock. You're going to see a pretty bright star directly east. That's the planet Saturn. And then about 11 o'clock, it's going to be replaced by another super bright star. That's the planet Jupiter. So we're just waiting for Earth to get a little bit further along its track along our orbit here to push Saturn and Jupiter up a little bit more. And that'll be at the end of October and November when we'll start doing some stargazing around here. And you can get some starlight in your eyes and not have to wait up all night for it to get dark. By the way, daylight savings switches the first Sunday of November, which I believe is November 5th. We go back an hour. So, looking up at the stars there, one of the best, get you a little star shine. Check out the Milky Way. You might see a hint of the Milky Way from your light polluted backyard, unless you're lucky, maybe like Gary Gerald, and live out in a farm there in Georgia and have go out in your backyard and see some dark sky. But get away from that city light or that neighbor's yard light or the street light the best you can, and let your eyes adapt to the dark. Your eyes dilate open, okay, and to let more light in. That's something the human eyeball does. So if you go outside and wait 10 minutes, you're going to see more starlight than if you just went out and start looking around and go, I don't see what Mark's talking about. Go inside. You got to let your eyes adjust a little bit. And the perfect evidence of that is when you go to bed tonight, you flip off that switch, you jump in bed, you can't see anything. 5 minutes later, before you just yawn for the last time to doze off, you can see everything in the room because your eyes have opened up. Your pupils have dilated to let more light in to see. So that's an important thing to remember when stargazing. Well, another star that is out there that I don't want you to look at through a telescope or any optical aid, of course, is the sun. Here's the sun today on spaceweather.com, covered with sunspots, including a really big one there in the center. It looks like Hawaiian Islands. Do not look at the sun with any optical aid. Leave it to an amateur astronomer to safely have the filters or project it to be seen. If you know how to do it, that's fine. But be safe, or you'll be sorry. Now, astronomers number the sunspots. This is 3423. They call that big one in the middle. That's just so they can talk about it. The ones on the left side, Marty, are going to move from left to right and take almost 2 weeks to go from one side of the sun to the other. The sun takes 28 days to rotate, almost 30 days to go once around. It's almost 1 million miles in diameter, so yet it moves very slowly. All right. In fact, our sun's a pretty small star. It's actually called a dwarf star. It's on the small scale of stars, but it's our one star that brings us life and everything else that we've ever known about. And it's just like every star up in the sky that we know now. Many of those stars have planets going around like our sun. So we're at a solar cycle that is increasing at a maximum, where we're seeing maximum sunspot activity. 3 years ago, there was a whole year where we didn't have any sunspots at all. And this sunspot activity is a 12-year curve between peaks and valleys, 6 years between of no sunspots, and then 6 years later, a lot of sunspots, and then it drifts down from a lot to none, and then back up. We don't know why. We need smart people like you out there to figure it out if you want to become a solar astrophysicist. So still, this is something that heats up the sun and is not talked about in the global warming issue, though the Earth has become a little bit warmer because the Earth is on a higher cycle of the sun is on a higher cycle of sunspots. Well, we wanted to give a little 9/11 tribute today to end our program as we end our stargazing part of it here. Such an important chapter of American history affecting families all over the world, not just in America. We've had the stories where people, become members of our armed services. Excuse me a second here. I'll get my glasses. Just because of this event 22 years ago, and we will never forget, as you see the blue temporary columns that were put up there. And this is Frank Culbertson, who talks about this a lot. Frank Culbertson was from Charleston, South Carolina. He had one of the clearest views of the terror attack from space. This is his third mission. He was on board the International Space Station with 2 other Russian crewmates. They were supposed to launch in July, but launched in August. He was just up there 30 days. And Culbertson said they didn't know what was going on, of course, like we did here on Earth with TV interrupting and radio interrupting everything. But he heard about it. Ironically, he said he was reading a Tom Clancy novel about terrorist attacks. And when the Capcom came up to him, he says, I was flabbergasted, then horrified. My first thought was that this wasn't a real conversation, that I was listening to one of my Tom Clancy tapes. It just didn't seem possible on this scale in our country. I couldn't even imagine the particulars, even before the news of further destruction began coming in. Well, traveling in at 5 miles a second, he quickly grabbed cameras as he realized he was coming over New York City. And he and the crew set up every camera they could and took pictures of everything they could see. Soon they were over Washington, directly over the Pentagon. He could see a gash in its side in the smoke. And then took the pictures here. Of course, here's what we were reliving on the ground. Such a horrible image to relive. And there's the smoke and fire and flame emanating from Manhattan there. The attack became personal for Culbertson as he found out that one of his old classmates from the Naval Academy was a captain of the flight that flew into the Pentagon. Charles Burlingame was a pilot of American Airlines Flight 77 that hit the Pentagon. So Culbertson had this to say about this that he wrote in space on 2 days later. Quote, it's difficult to describe how it feels to be the only American completely off the planet at a time such as this. The feeling that I should be there with all of you, dealing with this, helping in some way, is overwhelming. I know that we are on the threshold or beyond of a terrible shift in the history of the world. Many things will never be the same again after September 11th, 2001. Not just for the thousands and thousands of people directly affected by these horrendous acts of terrorism, but probably for all of us. We will find ourselves feeling differently about dozens of things, including probably space exploration, unfortunately. But he says, I have confidence in our country and in our leadership that we will do everything possible to better defend America and our families and to bring justice for what has been done. I have confidence that the good people of NASA will do everything necessary to continue our mission safely and return us safely at the right time. And I miss all of you very much. I can't be there with you in person. We have a long way to go to complete our mission, but be certain that our heart is with you, and I know you're in my prayers. And of about 4 weeks later, overlooking Afghanistan, Culbertson says he saw flashes of light and the combat had begun as he saw from space. So Frank Culbertson has been a leader at NASA since then, and he will always be associated with the attack on America on September 11th as the only human that was off the planet at the time. Well, let's get to what America did afterwards. A year later, NASA flew not a year later. The next shuttle mission after the attack on America, Endeavour's flight STS-108, December 5th, 2001, NASA flew 6,000 4-by-6-inch flags, there they are in a package, to honor the victims of the terrorist attacks. Students working at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, assembled the commemorative patches, including U.S. space-flown flags, to be presented to relatives of the victims. The distribution began on June 14, 2002, National Flag Day, at a ceremony at the American Museum of Natural History's Rose Center for Earth and Space in New York. And these flags, called the Flags for Heroes and Families campaign, was to honor and show support of all the thousands of brave men and women who selflessly contributed to the relief and recovery efforts. And that was immediately thought up and done by NASA then. And then we had something connected with Mars here, that you had the Honeybee Robotics employees in Lower Manhattan were building a pair of tools for grinding weathered rocks on Mars so that scientific instruments could inspect the rock's interiors. Well, the World Trade Tower was less than a mile away from Honeybee Robotics, and of course it shook the lives of the employees there. They had to meet a tight schedule for the launch, and they wanted to honor the people that they knew had lost their lives at the trade towers. So an aluminum cuff covering a cable shield on each of the rock abrasive tools of Mars rovers Opportunity and Spirit were fashioned out of metal that came from the World Trade Center towers. Aluminum recovered from there is now on the surface of Mars, as seen here on the robotic arm of Opportunity and Spirit. Those were the golf cart-sized rovers that went there. One lasted for 6 years, Spirit did, and Opportunity lasted for about 12. Well, the metal bears the image of an American flag and fills a renewed purpose as part of solar system exploration. Both rovers are silent now, but the victims and the memory of the September 11th attack will last for millions of years on the surface of Mars, as shown there. So, well, hope that you enjoyed this little different kind of stargazing day. As we cannot forget this day, those of you that are under, I guess, 22 years old, or under, you'd have to be about, 32 to be 10 years old when this happened. And something that we can't forget and will never forget, the worst attack on American soil. Doug Forrest, I'm glad that you were here to see your pretty face there in the back. Tom Usiak, of the picture I shared there with Tom Usiak, was also in that. Dave Stange, good to see you. Carlton Bailey, thank you for sharing this beautiful picture, Carlton. We appreciate your partnership at the American Space Museum. Cynthia Rossi, Space Monkey, Gary Gerald, and Bill Whiting is watching from the Space Coast, having come down here from Michigan. It's good to see you, Bill, out at the Space Center the other day. So we hope that everybody enjoys a peaceful and take the peaceful day, take the time to remember the victims and how our lives have been affected, like Frank Culbertson said, as he wrote days after this event, that he knew the world would be different. And it certainly has been in many ways. We can fly safer and so forth, but in our hearts are all the people who lost their lives in that horrible tragedy over 2 decades ago, September 11th, 2001. So, Marty, thank you for a great Streamlabs job today. we're going to do 4 NASA launches tomorrow. Okay, that's right. We've got Gemini 11 was launched in space history on the 12th of September, and 3 shuttles were launched. Which ones? Watch and find out. Wednesday, we're going to have Terry White give us some more stories from the shuttle garage. We're going to focus on all of the impacts that the space shuttle took from meteoroids that were in space there, and how some were close calls and how some of it was just taken for granted, to give you a hint of how many hits that space station's taken. Terry White, we can't wait for you to come to Stay Curious with us tomorrow. So until then, I'm Mark Marquette saying that we can't wait to see you again to bridge the space between us.